Good morning and welcome to Northern Lights Spiritual Center. To those of you on Facebook and those of you on Zoom. Today is the first Sunday of May. And here we are in Northern Lights Spiritual Center is a community of people dedicated to using spiritual and practical principles to create the lives we want to live. Northern Lights also offers practical and spiritual tools to make positive changes in our lives. And normally at this time, Reverend Vaughan Amaré, who's speaking today, would be singing, but we're going to have a YouTube version of In This Very Room. So, hang on. And today's reading is, well, I guess I could use the mic. Some people can't hear. It's from a special Soul to Soul episode of Super Soul Sunday, where Oprah asked, "What is the soul?" Gary Zukav said, "The soul is the part of you that exist before you were born and that will exist after you die. It's the highest, most noble part of yourself that you can reach for. Ileana von Sant said, the soul, I believe, is the fingerprint of God that becomes a physical body. I believe that it's fingerprint. It's the fingerprint. It's unique to everyone. Deepak Chopra said, the soul is the core of your being. It is eternal. It doesn't exist in space and time. It's a field of infinite possibilities, infinite creativity. It's your internal reference point, with which you should always be in touch with. Devon Franklin said, the soul is the spirit. It is a connecting line to God. I believe the soul is where the Holy Spirit resides. I believe that it is literally, you know. When you pick up the phone and then you have a 4G network, the soul isn't 4G network, right to heaven to me. Daniel Pink said that the soul is, I think, our capacity to see that our lives are about something more than simply the day-to-day, and that we're here for a purpose. It could be connected to religion or not, but that there is a purpose of your being here. Eckhart Tolle said, the soul is your innermost being, the presence that you are beyond form, the consciousness that you are beyond form. That is the soul. That is who you are in essence. Wayne Dyer said, the soul is the birthless, deathless, changeless part of us, the part of us that looks out from behind our eyes and has no form. The soul is so infinite that there is no in or out of it. It is everywhere. There's no place that it is not. Marianne Williamson said, for me, it's the truth of who we are. The light, the love which is within us goes by different names. But the truth of us, Michelangelo said that when he got a statue, that he would go to the quarry and get a big piece of marble, and the way he imagined it, God had already created the statue, and it was his job was to just get rid of the excess marble. So that's what we're like. Inside, it's the being that God has already created. Some call it the Christ, the Buddha mind, the light, the soul. And our job is to get rid of this excess, useless fear, thought forms of the world that actually hide the soul, the light of the soul. And finally, Gene Houston said, I believe that the soul is the essence of who we are, who and what we are. I personally believe that it transcends our leaving this mortal coil. And I think I think it comes with codes and possibilities and the next layers of who and what we may yet be. It is often a pain in the neck because it says, wake up. It's time to wake up. Don't go to sleep. I think it is also the lure of becoming. That's what I think the soul is. And so it is.
Hello, so the song today comes from an album, A Love Worth Fighting For. And this song is called Listen to My Heart, performed by Bill McKinley. Just a second. I have disconnected from the Bluetooth, and so I have to reconnect with it. Because while my phone sound is great, it will be better through the speakers.
Listen to my heart, listen to it sing, listen to my voice, it wants to tell you everything. There's so much to say, I don't know where to start, but if you want to know the love I'm feeling, listen to my heart. All my life I've been on a road, going one way, towards one dream. The road would wind, and down it I would go, always searching, never finding. But even in my darkest hour I always knew that some way, somehow, the road would lead to you. And words can't express how my heart's filled with happiness. Listen to it, listen to my heart, listen to it sing, listen to my voice, it wants to tell you everything. Listen to my song, listen to it soar. I've waited all my life for this one moment, I'm not waiting anymore. Listen to my heart as it cries for all the years that it was lonely. Listen to my heart as it smiles to know that now after so long I can finally sing my song. And you're here and you're listening, you're listening. Listen to my voice, and it will tell you everything, all about the life that's just about to start. And if you want to know how much I love you, listen to my heart. Listen to my heart. Listen to my
So again, that's Listen to My Heart by Bill McKinley. And I wanted to start with that song for today's talk because the whole month is about listening to our hearts. And the means that today's talk is using for listening to our heart is leaning into our souls. And in the reading that Mykal gave, he described soul from a variety of perspectives. And we can send the words of that out so people can reflect on what it is that people have said about the soul. To summarize, what I really want to have us think about is that the soul is that place, and we can go to the PowerPoint, and I'll step away and you can read, hopefully. So, we can go to the next one. So, think of the soul as our experience of longing, serving as a cue that our souls are at work and play. Our hearts empower us to meet our longings. So whenever we have a sense of longing, whenever we have a sense that there should be more in the world, that we're incomplete, that is our soul speaking with us. So I'm going to be talking first about the soul, and then I'm going to be moving into thinking of the soul as with regard to its vastness. And then finally, I'm going to be talking about the soul as a means of an update on how Ernest Holmes characterized mind, soul, and body. So in terms of the soul, one of the things that I wanted to share today is the notion that we know that our soul is being called when we have the experience of doom and gloom, no room, and then the desire to zoom away from what's going on. So doom and gloom, I think that it may be possible that people have an awareness of soul, that our soul is speaking to us with the sense of doom and gloom associated with the pandemic. I mean, it's very difficult to find a bunch of people who are characterizing this as a time of bliss. You know, right now there are people that are walking around carrying guns, asserting their right, their freedom, their inalienable right to put the rest of the world at harm, in harm's way. And that is something that pushes us into our souls. It pushes us to be engaging in a deeper way. One of the things that I'm going to have us be thinking about is, for me, I characterize the soul as that aspect of ourself which lets us experience the depth of life. Probably most people have heard the idea of, that's a deep person, or the idea that something is very soulful. There's this notion of depth that comes with soulfulness. I would say that oftentimes our thoughts can lead us to the sense of heights, to the sense of how far out things can be. And to a large extent, I would claim or have us propose and consider that our bodies give us a space of the breadth of creation. So through our senses, we are able to engage in the world. So if you take a moment, find something beautiful in your space. And that finding of beauty, I would claim that is enabled by the breadth, by our sensory operandi, how we are able to get in touch with beauty. And it's the depth of the soul that lets that beauty carry us away. I don't know about you, but I can speak for myself that there are moments of beauty where it's impossible to find the words to try to capture that. So we know that we are called into a reckoning with our souls in those experiences of doom, zoom, gloom, room. We don't feel like we have enough room. There is a creature that was created in a world by J.K. Rowling called the Alchemy. And the Alchemy lived inside of the main character's. The main character was Newt Scamander, and he was a magical creatures specialist. And the alchemies hatched when he got from England to the United States. And he went from England to the United States because he knew that some of the creatures that he had, he wanted them to have their natural home, their natural habitat. And unfortunately, as the story goes on, some of the creatures in his case escape. And one that he didn't count properly was an alchemy. And an alchemy is able to grow to fill available space. The alchemy are also able to shrink to fit in available space. And I bring this story of the alchemy up. What I'll do is I will give Mykal a YouTube link and he can send it out so that you can see it if you're not familiar with this. But I think that in many ways our souls are like the alchemy. Sometimes we shrink down our souls. Sometimes we don't feel like there is room for us to express. And on the other hand, our soul can give us almost infinite expansion. And that difference, that sense of constricted and contracted, expansive, it leads to the next point that I want to make about the soul. In each of the explanations that was given for the definition of the soul, about the lasting beyond the body as our unique individualized expression, one of the other ideas that I'd like to share today about the soul is that there's a notion that we are all connected and that there is a soul to the universe. There's a set of ideas conveyed by something called fractals. And I don't know how many people have heard of fractals, but they're something that you see all the time. They are the repeating patterns that show up in different scales and different sizes. So our vascular system, how our capillaries and our veins and our arteries expand and express through our bodies, is an example of a fractal. Has anyone ever seen a tree or a plant? Those are examples of fractals in nature. The idea of the seashell and the increasing sizes of it. What Ernest Holmes taught really was the idea that each one of us are individualized expression of the divine. So I think we can go to the next. So this was by Ralph Waldo Emerson. We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. Meantime within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty. Part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. And this deep power in which we exist, and whose beatitude is all accessible to us, is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the things seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. I think that sense of our oneness out of the universal soul gets expressed with the idea of the fractal, that our individual hearts are the fractal of all the heart of creation. How often do we feel a need to try to shut down our hearts? And that's a little bit where the sense of room and gloom and zoom and doom that I talked about at first is that sometimes we pull in and we constrict. And when we do that, we cut ourselves off from our power. People familiar with the science of my teachings may well have heard the notion that a thought plus a feeling leads to an outcome. And when we shut off ourselves from our feelings, we're very unlikely to arrive at the outcome that we're wanting to achieve. How many people have ever prayed for something and found that it didn't show up? And in that time, I can't speak for you, but I can certainly speak for me, that there were times that I have felt that God was betraying me. That God was not in my corner, that Spirit was just saying, I'm not going to pay you any attention. You're not good enough. The problem with that interpretation is that it puts responsibility. It puts it all on God. And then, of course, there's the other side of the story. And I think many of you have heard this because I've talked about this before. There's that story where a person is shown their journey through this desert. And they see at first that there are two sets of footprints side by side. And then, as the journey becomes very difficult, there's only one set of footprints. And then it goes back to being two sets of footprints. And the person who is seeing their life reviewed for them in this manner turns to God and said, why did you abandon me at that really rough, awful time? And God turns around and says, listen, dude, I didn't abandon you. I was carrying you then. We're not able to enact our power. We're not able to be that bright, expansive presence when we succumb to gloom and doom. When we are only seeking the room for ourselves. When we are only fleeing and zooming away. We are constricting ourselves like the alchemy that goes from being completely filling the room to fitting inside of a little teacup. One of the rewards of constriction is that we can let go of responsibility. We can console ourselves into the notion that the world happens to us and that we are merely victims. And why do we do that? Well, it's great. We get a lot of sympathizers. Because I can't speak for you, but sometimes there's an audience that we are able to draw with the scope of our terrible tales. I was subjecting Mykal to a series of shows yesterday called The Good Witch. And one of the features of the Good Witch, this character, Cassie Nightingale, is that no matter what comes to her, she always sees the positive in things. In some ways, The Good Witch is like a modern-day reenactment of Pollyanna. Because what The Good Witch, Cassie Nightingale, and what Pollyanna do is that no matter what life presents to them, they see it as a game, as an opportunity. They live soulfully that Each challenge, each obstacle is an opportunity for growth, for expansion, for extension, for going beyond where they had ever been before. They let go of the idea that life is supposed to be easy, and they let go of the idea that life is supposed to just show us because we want it that way. When Mykal and I were taking the landmark course, one of the invitations from Landmark was to behold our problems as opportunities. To see, can we set our life on something that is so huge? I think about a person who comes to mind in describing this is Bill and Melinda Gates. Bill and Melinda Gates have taken on huge world problems. They've looked at world health. They've looked at they've looked at obstacles to education. They've looked at all kinds of things. They don't set their sights on small things. It isn't about everybody has a pot of rice in their home. Not that that's small, but the idea is, how do we join in thinking as expansively and in feeling so expansively? How do we let ourselves be caught up in the glory of what's possible? If we can go to the next slide. Ernest Holmes learned from and taught from the work of Thomas Troward. And I want to read this, and this is contracted. Let me say that. Thomas Troward was an attorney. And in some ways I have an affinity for Thomas Troward because I can speak ad nauseum. I can try to say a whole lot of stuff. And sometimes simpler is better. Thomas Troward would never believe that. So I cut down because I want to get to the core of something that I think Thomas Troward had to share about the soul. He proposed, and this is cut down, the soul is a reflection and image of the infinite spirit and recognition of the cosmic creative process, and our possession of this power lets the infinite spirit find outlet for its conscious recognition of itself as the life, love, and beauty. I think that this is really important. Sometimes it's hard to wade through all of the words that get thrown at us. But I think that there's something about this. If our soul is a reflection of the infinite, what do we become? How much greater, how much more power do we have at our command? How much do we let ourselves expand, like the alchemy, and fill the space that we've been given? How much do we remember that the divine is acting in, as, and through us? That we are the individualized means through which infinite power is expressing. What if So I'm going to give us a homework assignment for this week. What if we are to start the day leaning into our souls and leaning into the notion that my soul is reflecting the infinite spirit? How does our day change? How does our movement through our lives change when we take the moment and recognize that each one of us are individualized means through which all power, all glory, all beauty, all wisdom, all truth has the opportunity to make itself more known in the world? That we exist so that we can express more of what Spirit is. And I give this as a homework assignment because I would say that this is the kind of work that lets us expand our soul rather than come from a place of contraction. You know, how different is it if we start the day from this place versus the notion of, I didn't really sleep that well. I've had this cough. I'm still stuck at home. I'm not where I want to be. Again, lean into that notion of that sense of I'm not where I want to be, that I don't feel the way I want to feel, that I have been let down. What if those are the calls from our soul to recognize that we are places into which magnificence can express and can expand and can have its being? In the song, Listen to My Heart, what if that is our souls speaking with Spirit? And Spirit speaking with our souls. That it's this reciprocal love song. What would we be like if we just live in the place that we are the beloved of love itself? What becomes available to us when we live soulfully in that frame, from that depth of being? And how do we be gracious with ourselves when we don't live up to that? Instead of nagging on ourselves and saying, oh my gosh, I got really hooked into doom and gloom. I really constricted. I really became less. Instead of using that as a or to beat over our own heads. Because again, I don't know about you, but I know that the universe has definitely given me a couple of 2x4s the head. What if we stop beating ourselves up and just say, oh, I was like the alchemy and I landed myself in this little teapot also that I could eat a bug. And I could be so much more, so much expanded beyond that. So to let each moment be a moment. If we don't do it first thing in the morning, and we don't remember until it's almost bedtime, and we're almost asleep, even in that moment, to be able to say, oh, I'm not asleep yet, and I am that place. I am, my soul is the connection to the great spirit of the universe. The depth of me is bigger than what I realized so far. And as I enter into my dreams, I can know greater possibilities. So I have an affirmation for us, and I hope you'll be able to see it. I don't know, but I'll invite you to join me in it for 3 times. And here's how it goes. I'll say it once the first time. I ground myself in the awareness of my unity with Spirit. I recognize the limitless power within. I awaken my soul's full potential and become an outward reflection of life itself. So now please join me for 3 more times of that. I ground myself in the awareness of my unity with Spirit. I recognize the limitless power within. I awaken my soul's full potential and become an outward reflection of life itself. Now, how did that feel? Here's times 2. Now, bring it up. Amplify it. You're the alchemy who is bursting out of that teapot. Decide how big you're going to be. I ground myself in the awareness of my unity with Spirit. I recognize the limitless power within. I awaken my soul's full potential and become an outward reflection of life itself. And now the third time, you are the expansion. You are expanded into your whole house. You are expanded into your whole neighborhood. You are expanded into the city where you live. You are expanded into the world. I ground myself in the awareness of my unity with Spirit. I recognize the limitless power within. I awaken my soul's full potential and become an outward reflection of life itself. And so it is. So thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the Facebook people. I hope that your practices this week of becoming that expanded alchemy is something that is delightful. And I'm going to move into the group discussion with Zoom folks. So thank you so much. Have a great week. All the best.